French colonization. Now, quick note here, you'll notice it doesn't have a chapter with it. Unfortunately, your book does not really cover much of French colonization, so please, 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 if you have any questions or concerns about this, don't hesitate to email me, reach out in some way or another, and I definitely encourage you, if you're struggling with the section, to listen through it multiple times. So, we have two sections on this specifically. We're going to have early French colonization in the Americas. This is going to be this slide. Basically, this is looking at France in the 16th century or the 1500s. France is very much going to be motivated. They're watching Spain. They're watching Cortez and all of the gold. And so this is going to bring enough funding for like the voyage of Giovanni de Verrazzano. He basically would map the North American coast. And then we see in like the 1530s and 40s, Jacques Cartier, who has 3 different voyages, and he is specifically looking for 2 things: rich mines. This would be up north of present day like Montreal. And then the second big thing he's looking for is a water route to Asia. So notice it's not being that they really want to colonize. They're looking for gold, and they are looking for that water route to Asia. So this is very much economically inclined. However, that being said, the second of these 3 voyages, we're going to see that Jean-Francois de la Roque is supposed to establish a permanent settlement in Canada on Cartier's route and everything. The thing is, recruitment is extremely low. It turns out not a lot of people wanted to move to this very inhospitable place, and they end up forcing convicts to come with them. On top of that, once they get there, Cartier kind of drops some people off, and then he sails ahead without permission. He finds what he thinks is gold and diamonds, but when he returns to France, it turns out it's fool's gold and it's quartz crystals. Overall, when you're looking at early France and the Americas, it's very poorly organized. In fact, they face several different uprisings due to like the cruel treatment of the colonists, and many of them had been, convicts and everything like that. When it came to their relationship with the locals, this would be the Iroquois. Basically, the Iroquois saw no reason to actually help these French colonists. They were very suspicious, and generally these colonists went back home. Now the French did try a few times further south, but generally these would be either abandoned or like captured by Spain, and then they're facing problems at home, so it takes a while for them to get going again. Here though you can see Cartier's routes and how far he got down and everything, so you can see where like Quebec and everything is going to eventually be. And then you have France later. This is the colonization more in the 17th century. At this point, basically civil order's been restored in France. During this time, we're going to see permanent settlements are actually going to be established along the St. Lawrence River and later into the continent's interior. In 1608, we're going to see Samuel de Champlain has an expedition of more than 130 miles up the St. Lawrence River. That was that river that you saw on the last slide. And he is going to help establish the permanent settlement of Quebec, which is actually going to form around like 3 different villages. It was really important for this to succeed. They are going to rely on their relationship with the Native Americans and specifically trade with the Native Americans. They're going to trade for beaver pelts, which could be a very high commodity back in Europe. And in return, basically, Native Americans would trade for things like axes, knives, metal pots, glass beads. You even see this with like some French colonists would end up taking Indian wives. Keep in mind, there's not a lot of French women in these colonies. It's also not a hugely widespread process. Generally, it was more like the loner types who'd venture alone into the forests and live off the land. A lot of times they needed to have some sort of relationship to the local peoples, and what better way to establish that relationship than to marry a local woman, a Native American woman. We also see religion getting involved at this time. The first missionaries from the French persuasion were actually Jesuit missionaries in the 1630s. Quick note, so we have Christianity, which there's Catholicism and Protestantism. Under Catholicism, you would have things like Jesuit, Franciscan, and so much more. So Jesuits are going to be Catholic. So basically, they wanted to bring Native Americans into the French colonies to, save their souls. However, this fails, and instead they would adapt, and instead the Jesuits would learn Native Americans' language, and they would actually travel to villages and bring religion to them. Now, we are going to see some changes during the 17th century, in the late 17th century. In 1663, King Louis XIV basically disbands the Company of New France, assumes direct control. I'm not going into all the details here. However, he does really want to improve the defenses of, his people over in New France, and so he would send companies of professional soldiers. However, that's not all he sent. He also sent what came to be known as the King's Daughters. Basically, he sent 700 women over to New France to basically provide wives for the colony. That being said, even with these women, when you're looking at men to women, it was like 6 men for every 1 unmarried woman. So, ladies, you had some pretty good odds in New France. That being said, there's not a whole lot of immigrants coming to New France. A lot of the immigrants that did come were indentured servants that were working for years in return for like food, lodging, maybe a small salary, and then, return passage to France. The thing is, New France, if you've ever gone up to, modern day Canada and everything and decided to stay outside in the late winter, it's an inhospitable place. And so because of this, about 3 out of 4 immigrants would return home. Now you might be going, but wait a second, they're still going to grow. This colony is going to grow. The thing is, the population growth here is going to be more from natural increase than anything else. So as much as women had their choice of the men, women typically in New France would bear somewhere between 10 to 15 children over the course of their life. Most are going to find husbands. There are not a lot of single ladies out there. Farming, when we're looking at the economics of New France, really was for local consumption only, so they weren't making enough to sell at the market and everything like that. That being said, there are going to be some colonists that would own the land outright in New France, which was a really big deal because owning land during this time period means basically you have a right to participate in politics and have a say. It's a huge deal. However, as much as there were these colonists that owned land, they never really enjoyed anything comparable to the status of aristocrats back in France. We're also seeing the colonies growing out, especially with this natural increase of population and everything. The king of France was very concerned about this, worried about this expansion, because with expansion means you have more territory to defend, but there wasn't much he could do about it. We're going to see this expansion continues on. Like, for instance, in the 1670s, French traders and missionaries would reach the Mississippi River. And in fact, in 1681, Robert Sieur de La Salle is going to follow the Mississippi River all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico and claim the entire valley for France in what comes to be Louisiana. And so that's why you have, to this day, French Louisiana. You can see that in Canada and everything. There's areas of Quebec that France is one of their languages still spoken predominantly to this day. And so this brings us to a part of your participation today. It's part of a journal. In a couple of words, looking at the French and the Spanish so far, compare the two. What is similar about them? What is different about them?